Parenting doesn't come with a manual, or does it? Today, we're going to dive into the innovative world of social and emotional learning with Nadim Saad, a best-selling author, entrepreneur, and the mind behind the Happy Confident Company, who's on a mission to change how we approach family well-being. Now, Nadim is a parenting expert, author of several books, including the bestseller Kids Don't Come With a Manual, and the founder of the Happy Confident Company. Now, from creating transformative SEL tools like the SEL cards to leading workshops that have touched over 100,000 families, Nadim's work combines psychology, neuroscience, and real-world practicality. Nadim, welcome to the International Classroom Podcast. How are you today?
Thank you, Alex. I'm very good. The start to 2025 has been amazing, and we're really feeling a lot of transformation for schools and families this year. So I'm delighted to be here and be talking about this.
Well, we are absolutely delighted to have you on here. Whereabouts in the world do we find you today?
I'm in London, but I travel quite a lot, going to education conferences, Asia, US, everywhere where they want to hear about how we can change the system to make it better, to get children to really be more resilient, more connected, and have better grades at the end, but be happier and more successful.
Amazing. So let's just dive into a little bit of your background then, because obviously you've had anything but a straightforward career with this. Serial entrepreneur, we've got that, and then diving into this concept of parenting coach, we've got then the social emotional learning side of things. What inspired this journey for you? And along the way, what experiences would you say have kind of shaped the mission that you find yourself on today?
As in many cases, it's all a lot of personal, it's personal impact, and having kids really, changed obviously the game for me completely. So I've always been an entrepreneur, but then I thought I was a great parent, but my wife, who's a Montessori teacher, did not agree. So the thing is, I considered there was no science to all of this, and therefore just would tell her, don't give me a parenting book, just give me an exec summary and show me it works. And then maybe I'll because for the moment, I think I'm doing great. So much better than my parents had done. And I turned out okay. That's the typical answer of parents. And then, thankfully, she started looking for, actually, because she was more permissive, I was more authoritarian, and we couldn't really agree on what was the right thing. But I was seeing that she wasn't always doing what she was telling her parents in her school to do. Because obviously, when the emotions come, take over, even great teachers can operate differently when they're at home. I'm sure you've seen that. And so it's amazing, actually. And so thankfully she did find things that worked, and she managed to lead by example. And so I became very interested, and I literally decided to dedicate my life to this, because I realized there's a science to parenting that we don't know about, and there's an art of parenting. So I'm very much into this, developing the science and the art. So the art is the skill bit, is the listening, is the understanding, is the how to adapt that science to every child. It's like education, you want to personalize it. So that's the art bit, but the science is actually the science of humans. The science is it's child psychology. It's understanding how to fulfill children's needs. And for some reason, whether it's at home or at school, we're not doing this currently. We've got a whole system that's completely broken, because it's not based on psychology and the science of child development. I mean, of course, schools and the curriculum is partly based on child development, and obviously ensuring that in terms of age-appropriate information, yes, it is. But in terms of what the child needs to learn about themselves, and about how to be a human, how to be the best version of themselves, there's nothing. The curriculum is completely, there's nothing in there. I mean, okay, there are some great schools who do great things, and there are great teachers, actually, who do great things because it's naturally, they understand what's needed for the children. But in terms of the curriculum, the national curriculum, there's nothing in there And while it should be mandatory to make sure that we address children's needs and where they are and their, so yeah, that's
you've kind of wrapped up the mission there pretty much nice and succinctly, isn't it? In terms of wanting to develop, let's say, parenting skills, but we're at that point, aren't we, where children nowadays spend so much time in school, spend so much time with educators, teachers like myself. What's the mission for teachers?
So it's really about giving. So teachers don't want to be counselors. Obviously, they don't have time. They're totally overwhelmed, and they're not being taught whether in their training or in schools. They don't have. They're basically it's just not about the teacher. It's about the system doesn't have the tools to address children's needs. And these tools are pretty simple. It's actually about making sure that everyone understands, that the children understand themselves and the teachers too, by the way. So basically it's a program ultimately is for the children as well as the teachers in understanding themselves and their needs, in understanding that we all have difficult thoughts, negative thoughts, and that actually we need to deal with them. So the biggest transformation in our program is 8-year-olds who realize, oh, I'm not the only one who has negative thoughts. Oh, everyone else has them. Oh, okay, I'm normal. Oh, I'm a human. And bringing this vulnerability because as parents, so it's very linked to families and schools are very linked here. And in families, what we do naturally is like, oh, no, you don't have to think that way. Just think positively. And so basically we're constantly denying our children their feelings or their thoughts because we just want to reassure them. We want them to be more resilient. But we tend to do the opposite of what we should be doing. Like if you want resilience, you actually first have to acknowledge the child where they are and understand them and understand, they could be a hypersensitive child. So you've got to address that. And then from meeting them where they are, then you develop the tools and you get them to develop this resilience. So it's how do we bring into the system, whether in families or in schools, these tools, and they have to be positive daily habits. They have to be based on a daily thing because it's not just suddenly, oh, let's address a problem when it's a problem. It's actually, no, let's teach you the skills on a daily basis. And it only takes 5-10 minutes a day to teach kids in families and schools about their feelings, about understanding how to regulate their feelings, about understanding different feelings. It's not all because the research, Brené Brown's research shows that on average we use 3 feelings as adults, and you can guess happy, sad, angry.
Yeah, those are the 3 I was going to say.
And it's not very helpful because actually you need to have. So neuroscience shows that if you define more granularly a feeling and you actually you name it. And Dan Siegel's name it to tame it, then you reduce the intensity of the feeling in the brain. And so it's so important for them to be able to be granular and to understand all the different feelings and to be able to name them. That's the beginning of the regulation. And then, so it's first so that's why the base of our program is really the understanding of all these feelings and how to name them and how to understand them and how to understand how they impact the behavior and the tools to recover from these feelings. So that's kind of the SEL part of the program. But then we're very much into, well, particularly for teachers or in families, they're just like, oh, it's a bit overwhelming because the kids suddenly are sharing a lot more. What do I do with all this? Well, then you have to bring the tools in. And the tools are actually, we call them the powers, because children more than ever need a sense of agency. People are really wondering why we've got such a mental health crisis, and there's so many theories out there. But the simplest way to see it, I say, is look, just imagine that suddenly you've got your brain is not fully developed, as we know. It's developed until the age of 24, because the prefrontal cortex is who's basically the decision maker, the one that helps us self-regulate, is still in development until the age of 24. So actually, we really become adults when we're 24. That's why suddenly, when we're 24, we suddenly love our parents and we realize, oh, they've done so much for us. And until then, we're just in, pushing them back. And if you've noticed, well, I've noticed. And so these tools of regulation, but then of understanding the power, the sense of agency is so necessary now because we've got 100 times more options. We've got, Harvard did a research on thoughts. And basically, we've got twice as many thoughts as we had 10 years ago. For our kids, it's probably 10 times because they didn't do the research on kids. But it's at least 10 times the number of thoughts that we had. And as adults, we're already quite overwhelmed with everything we have to do. At the moment, things seem to accelerate. There's just so many choices. But for kids, it's just totally overwhelming. As you can imagine, basically, it's a fake. So that in itself explains why there's so much more anxiety. And there's so much. So just obviously when they become teens and they even have to decide how they're going to deal with their, digital profile. So they're already struggling enough to take care of their own, self and their identity. On top of that, they've got to deal with their digital identity and know what they're going to do. I have my 17, who's asking me, is this picture okay? It's kind of, what do I post? I'm like, can you just come back to your center and just realize that this is really not that important. And it's difficult for them to realize that, that whole digital, persona is and they have to create now has to be aligned with their own self. But so that's a very small way of saying, you can imagine the overwhelm of these kids who have to create these different personas and have so many more thoughts and so many more options that they ever had. And their brain is not developed. Therefore, we've got to help them from an early age develop these tools. Is to give these kids the sense of agency. And the best way to reduce anxiety is to not to feel powerless and to really, have that sense of agency over our lives, which we don't always get in families because as parents, we tend to just be, not we, I'm not going to generalize, but a lot of parents will want to control, obviously, and so give orders, etc. While we have to go a lot more into questions and choices and give these kids that sense of agency. So
yeah, how do we go about doing that then when in school? Because you mentioned earlier about the system being broken and we've got issues and a lot of the conversations I have and I talk about like the burden of content within curriculum, the burden of siloed subjects. Now we've got AI coming into it. We've got AI being embedded into social media platforms. What do you think specifically needs to change so that we can embed and then more of what we're talking about here about social emotional? What would you be changing in the educational curriculums?
So we're creating a top-down approach and a bottom-up, and I prefer focusing on the bottom-up because the top-down is literally changing the curriculum completely. And thankfully, I have now been analyzing this for many years, and I know what can be done. And actually, there are a few schools that are doing amazing things on that. But I think this is where I'd rather, because we're speaking to people who just this is a bigger enterprise. Let's focus on the bottom-up, which is. Actually, I mentioned the 5-10 minutes a day that can be transformational. So we've spoken to so many schools. And so the challenge was initially it was hourly, sessions that really brought all of this knowledge into schools. But then we realized there's such a pushback. They don't have an hour week. And therefore, we actually managed to try and make this challenge an opportunity because we realized that using the science of positive daily habits, the science of habits, is actually, if you chunk this up in 5-10 minutes a day, which any school can find, then actually it's a lot more achievable. And what we realized is actually also not only more achievable, but it's a lot more effective. So it's literally creating a curriculum within the curriculum. So it's a mental wellness curriculum that only requires 5-10 minutes a day. And that's what we've created. And the way to deliver it, to make sure that it's not a burden on teachers, on the contrary, they don't need to be trained, but they get upskilled. So it's a really great value add for the teachers. And it's basically in 5-10 minutes a day of videos and activities. So we've got more than 150 videos and more than 1,000 activities that teach, so basically these 100 feelings. So it's 12 feelings per year group. So for example, in reception, you'll learn the basics, basically the happy, the sad, the calm, angry. But as you go up, you end up with patronized, pressured,
powerless, hopeless. I mean, the big ones, the ones that we end up feeling, as we grow up. And then you've got, so that's the feelings curriculum. And then you've got the powers curriculum, the 10 powers. And the 10 powers goes from the power of introspection. So we actually use big words for kids as young as 5, 6. Really the life skills program, the character skills program starts early, but we really expanded at 8 because this is where metacognition, really increases for children, and they can start realizing that they're not their thoughts. That concept of, I may have negative thoughts and everyone has them. That's what hermits basically, if you put them 20 years in a cave and they come out and they tell you, so what's your biggest discovery? They say that I'm not my thoughts. So isn't it better to actually teach this to kids when they're 7, 8 and they realize, I've got all these thoughts, but actually I don't have to take them for granted. Even these thoughts that say I'm not good enough, or never be good at this. I don't like math. This, all of that. Well, that's not helpful. So the kids learn to filter their thoughts with, is this thought helpful? Is this thought kind? And is this true? And as they start practicing this, they realize that probably the majority of the thoughts are not kind, helpful, or true. And so they can do something about it, and actually they can start choosing. So we call this our inner bully. Because we've got basically like constantly there telling us that, we're not judging. So when we reduce that inner bully and we start, really learning how to better deal with our thoughts, we become so much more compassionate with ourselves and more compassionate with others as well. Our relationship with ourselves changes, but our relationship with others changes too. So the beauty of that in 5-10 minutes a day is in that expansion of our knowledge of ourselves, but to better connect with ourselves. And we end up better connecting with others. So what we're really, in 5-10 minutes a day, we're creating communities in schools, basically where children are a lot more able to help to regulate themselves, but also help others. So we've got this, for example, charters. It's called the Feel It Promise, because the SEL program is called Feel It. And as part of the program, the first thing they do as a class is agree that all feelings are okay, that you can have all feelings, but that there are ways to express them that are better than others. And that how, as a team, so the acronym team, together, everyone achieves more. As a team, how we're going to deal with difficult feelings in the class. And so what's great is they agree on how they're going to help each other out. And then the next day, when you have a lonely child or an angry child, instead of like being rejected, you've got their peers, coming towards them and helping them out. And so it creates that environment, that community element where they feel they can be vulnerable, they can share when they have difficult feelings. And what's amazing in that, it helps. So the kids, often you've identified the send children, the difficult children, the teachers know them. And then you've got the okay ones that people don't really worry so much about. And then you've got the aces of the class. But what's amazing is when the okay ones start realizing, I'm okay, but maybe I've got something to share, and open up. And then suddenly it helps the ace, the ones, the one who have, the top ones realize, I also am not always great and I want to share too. And it helps the more difficult ones or the send ones to actually realize, actually everyone has challenges too. I'm okay. I'm better than I thought. And so everyone through this vulnerability, everyone is really winning because they realize, I can open up, and when I have a challenge, I can share it. And this is why I created the program in the first instance, because actually my 8-year-old daughter, was the most positive child you could imagine, went through a tough time. And she ended up admitting after a long coaching session that she hated herself. But I realized that I got this information out of her because I'm a parenting coach and I know all the tools. But in majority of families, she would have been punished because she was defiant, she was hitting her sisters, and she would have been punished. You had to suppress that feeling that she hated herself. And it would have become a bigger problem down the line. So that's why I created this opportunity for every child to understand better what they're going through.
So I'm curious then, obviously, because time you mentioned there a few times, like 5-10 minutes, and we mentioned about habits. all the schools you've gone and you've seen, and all the sort of leaders and educators that you've spoken with about this, how are you recommending it being implemented? Like, what are the ways in which you're suggesting, the ways in which they're doing it, so that it is habitual, that it does form a system for them, and so benefits the students? Because I'm sure there's multiple facets of different ways we can do it, but what are some of the best ways that you've seen this been implemented?
Yeah, it's very much so in the morning, registration form time or registration time, that the kids actually realize, today we're going, let's start our day talking about real talk. I mean, really talk about ourselves. And so even without our program, that can be implemented. That's why I want to make sure that people hear that start of the day with just a quick share is really valuable. The thing is, what we've seen, obviously, that kids don't really know how to share. They don't have the vocabulary to share. So we have to give them that vocabulary, the vocabulary of feeling, the vocabulary of understanding. So I mentioned the power of introspection is the first one, the understanding themselves. The power of optimism is the second one, the understanding thoughts, and how actually by becoming, standing up to your inner bully, basically, you can actually become a lot more optimistic and be more successful. The power of interoception, which is the ability to feel sensation of the body. So in teaching them these powers, basically these little short span of time, 5-10 minutes in the morning, they start reflecting on their day and having a perspective, being more mindful. It's a form of mindfulness, but not from the meditation side of mindfulness, but from the real being mindful and understanding of ourselves and our environment. And that's enough in these 5-10 minutes a day. When you give them that information, they end up it ends up going through the day being a lot more mindful and being more aware. And so that's why it pervades in just a couple of months of doing these 5-10 minutes a day and teaching them about feeling, teaching them about themselves. So through this curriculum, they end up really incorporating that in their daily life. So head teachers tell us, I can see, I go through the corridors and I'm hearing them sharing about feelings and having this new vocabulary and really going deeper and because they have a better understanding of themselves and a way to share it, to communicate it. And same with the teachers, because the teachers then have this vocabulary as well. And the teachers connect a lot more with the kids because the kids are asking them, so, do you also have these difficult feelings? Oh, when did that happen to you? And they start sharing personal information that makes them so much more connected to the children. So it creates that environment where everyone feels part of a bigger thing, part of a whole, in just 5-10 minutes.
And what are the practical tools that obviously you're using this? Because you mentioned that teachers don't need a massive amount of training for this. We can upskill them. But what are the practical tools that you're giving them? Like, I know we have the cards, for example, we'll come on to, but is there anything else that within the programs that's there to make their life easier?
Yeah, so one in the self-regulation, because we give them strategies on how to self-regulate on difficult feelings. Therefore, the teachers can always allude to that. Oh, what could you do when you feel embarrassed? What could you do when you feel, basically, because they're sharing a lot more. But the tools come as part of the program. Is you could do, what can you do when you're feeling pressured, for example? Oh, you can use your assertive voice. So how do you learn to be more assertive when you're feeling pressured? I mean, it's such simple things, but actually such powerful things. And as part of the Character School program, then you have a bigger tools like we call it PBS, pause, breathe, and smile. When you're about to flip it. So I love that. When I started the program, I knew that there was going to be a very important element of the program is that it's not just for the school, but also it impacts the families because the children bring this to the family. And so, for example, as part of the program, we have a weekly activity in the family where they're going to talk, for example, about the feeling of the week or the power of the week. And so, and basically they're going to talk about how they can address when the child feels powerless, what can they do about it? And so I knew it was going to have a big impact. And immediately in the first instance where I went in the school to try the program before I got it developed, at a bigger scale. And I got this mother who called me, like after the 5th session, and she says, you know what my kid did yesterday? An 8-year-old Mathieu. And he said I was getting angry at him because he wasn't doing what I was asking of him. He says, oh, Mom, you're about to flip your lid. You need a bit of PBS. And she was like, what's PBS? He was like, pause, breathe, and smile. And so she just couldn't help but laugh, obviously, and realize, wow, my child actually did not go into fight, flight, or freeze, because he realized that he didn't have to flip his lid, because that's what we do. Obviously, we end up putting our children in fight, flight, or freeze without even realizing as soon as we get angry. Instead, her child went, let's not go into that. Why don't we use a tool? PBS, And it's amazing, because then you see both in teachers, in schools, and in families, where children and teachers and parents start helping each other out, because they have the tools to recover from difficult situations and make sure that they don't go into fight, flight, or freeze, which is where you release cortisol. You're not in your prefrontal cortex anymore. Your prefrontal cortex literally shuts down, so you can't actually do anything rational. So as soon as we raise our voices, or we're too intense with the children, they might go into freeze, and actually they can't learn. So we need to get them out of this. And they can't, and their reactions might actually be really negative. And that's where you get so many reactions from children, because they're not actually operating from their rational brain. So it's relatively simple things. But as soon as people are aware of them and they start implementing them, it completely transforms the environment.
And I think the first time I met you, where we're talking about implementation here, was probably the year. I think we were at, again, would have been a conference, and it was the card.
The Middle East Leadership Conference. Yeah. Yes, the Middle East.
Which shout out is coming up in a month. It was the cards, and it was just looking through and flicking through those cards. For me, that was like a massive difference. Like, this is something I was like, I'd not seen anything like this before. Just the styling of them and the content of them. And it was just unique. It was almost innovational, to the point where everyone's talking about technology and doing this. It's like, it kind of echoed everything you've said about it's just so simple. But I'm really curious about what inspired their creation, and because they're so different to a lot of other SEL things that we currently see. It's like, where did the idea come from?
Thanks, for mentioning this. You're right about the intervention tools are a very important aspect. So it gives teachers reassurance, because they have tools. And so, the cards, that example, I always have them by my side, because I use them every day. So I am feeling, if that should be what I want to feel. So that's not the right card, but basically it's based on these colors, which are basically I'm not going to explain all of this now, but basically the pleasant feelings here, unpleasant feelings. And so basically the energy of the feeling and the pleasantness. And so you get the kids to really understand the different feelings using the cards. And the reason why I created them was actually realizing that I was asked by my therapist for many years, what are you feeling? And I would just go, I think I'm feeling, and I was like, no, stop thinking about, tell me what you're feeling. I was like, well, I haven't developed that. And so here I'm like kind of really I had to practice a lot, and I still practice to realize where I'm feeling things. That's why we develop interoception in children, so that early on they realize what they're feeling. But so the cards actually use a different part of the brain. When you're selecting cards about what you're feeling, you actually use a different part of your brain, and you access a lot more feelings. So you end up often with too many feelings. You end up, I'm feeling, or you end up with 10 cards. So someone who basically will tell you, I'm pretty sad at the moment. Like, well, let's explore. So I'm sad. And then they'd select also powerless, bored, disappointed, all of this. And then you ask them to reduce to 3, because that's the idea, is to realize that we might be feeling all of this, and it's true. But what are the things that I'm feeling the most? And sad is often the first thing that comes out, because actually it wasn't sadness. Sadness was part of it. But and so you can imagine feeling, you end up with disappointed, bored, and powerless, for example. And I'm giving you a live example actually of that happened recently. And then you go into what you want to feel, and then they end up obviously choosing the joyful, excited, delighted, excited, motivated, all of these things, inspired. And then you reduce to 3. And the majority of people will end up with safe, loved, and valued or understood. Because ultimately that's our primary need is really safety, love, and feeling understood, feeling part of something. And so when you look at with the kids, this is a great intervention tool. It only takes like less than 5 minutes initially, and then they start to become second nature. But when you look at the strategies to go from sad to happy, which is the typical thing that we're looking at, very different from the strategies that you're going to implement to go from disappointed, bored, and powerless to safe, loved, and and understood. And so we give these tools to the kids, and actually the teachers can explore these possibilities and strategies with kids. And then the next time the kids feel like that, they already know what they're supposed to do. And the teachers too, by the way, because the teachers also, most adults don't think that this way. So we end up in very little time having these set of simple strategies of how to recover from difficult feelings, and realizing we're a lot more, both more complex than we would think, but also that complexity doesn't need to overwhelm us because we've got all the understanding and all the tools to deal with that.
What's been the feedback on these, though, from, let's say, schools, from teachers, students, and even parents?
So, obviously, I'm not the most objective, and therefore I'm going to name our surveys rather than what the surveys show rather than that. So, in general, the qualitative feedback just on lies is very much as teachers, we're saving 10, 15 minutes a day, easy, just on interventions, just on that's not talking just about it's just the whole classroom is better behaved. Everyone behaves better because they realize that they don't have to act up. Acting up is actually usually a consequence of not having a need that's fulfilled. And therefore, when children can share and have the tools to communicate better, everything improves. So what's really beautiful is from the surveys we've conducted, is that after just 2 months, because we did these 2 months out into the implementation of the program, is that on average, 92% of children feel safer. That element that we think is obviously part of our days now, because we're not, unless you have real big difficulties, etc. But actually, children feel safer when they are emotionally in tune and they realize they can share and they're part of something or the community. Then they feel a lot safer. So 90% feel safer. 84% feel kinder. More than 86% feel better able to regulate their feelings, and also, and 80, I think it's 83, better able to help others regulate their feelings. Because that's what's great is obviously, as I mentioned with the Feel It Promise, you're learning to also help others. 78% feel more confident, and it takes a bit more than 2 months but basically that only increases as we grow. So these incredible, improvements in 5-10 minutes a day, and in just feeling part of the wider community is just amazing. And so in families, we launched the Parents Portal only recently, and the Parents Portal is part of what schools basically have access to. So basically, the parents end up with the information what's being taught at school, with a weekly activity where they basically will learn about a feeling with their kids and actually how to deal with that feeling, whether it's how to bring more of that feeling if it's a joyful feeling, or how to deal with that feeling when it appears if it's a more difficult feeling. So they get the tools that they can implement at home, and they also get an understanding of the 10 powers and how these powers can be developed at home. So how they can, because the sense of agency comes from, imagine the teacher or the parent going, oh, you've got a problem with your math. Okay, so what power can you use? So they could use their power of optimism to realize, oh, I can be good at this. I don't have to believe that I'm not good at maths. They can use their power of interoception to actually feel the feeling in the body and realize, oh, wow, I'm not comfortable with that math problem, but I don't have to, I can let go of this and shift this. Their power of mindset to realize that they can be good at anything because you've got neuroplasticity and your intelligence is not fixed. Or your power of failure to realize that, hey, it's okay to fail at that math problem. I can just give it a try. It's better. I'll learn something from it. Or the power of resilience to just recover, to realize they can recover from any challenge. Or even with the math problem, the power of creativity, because actually you can look at maths in different ways, because creativity is not just about arts, but it's actually about everything you bring and looking at things from different perspectives. So I just named like the 5 powers that you can use. So just imagine as a kid, you've got these powers at hand, but if they're not coming up with it, as a parent or as a school teacher, you know that you can tell them, you can direct them to using these powers. And so they feel just a lot more capable of addressing any challenge.
I want to flip it on its head then, and because there's lots of positive evidence that you've given there, but on the other side of it, do you think that the emphasis on all of these tools could lead to overstructured parenting where we're going to miss out on natural or organic interactions, these emotional interactions? How do you go about balancing structure with the organic?
Great question. I think the thing is currently most parents or teachers don't actually have a structure for these kind of things. So you're right. So actually it feels like because suddenly we're giving a structure, oh my God, but what happens with these conversations? But actually this structure is actually a gateway to enormous amount of information. So just what are the different ways you felt today? And actually just the sharing of this one feeling just opens up to an incredible exchange that has nothing to do with the structure. That's way beyond the structure. So that structure is what enables the deeper conversation. So we've had so many parents who said, oh my God, I've never had these type of conversations with my kids. Because we never thought about, for example, you look at as part of the power of resilience, you've got this resilience graph where you realize that when you start something, often you get better at it quickly. You can, depends on the thing, but we were talking language or an instrument, it comes quite quickly and then you're just super excited. But then at some point you need to put a lot more time for it to be better. So you've got this dip, and often the majority of people will let go, basically, will say, oh, I'm not doing this anymore because it feels like a lot of effort. But what they don't know is actually in this dip where most people, just let go of it, there's a upcoming, it's going to come up and actually you're going to feel much better about it very soon. Because your neuroplasticity kicks in and you're actually going to start feeling that it's a lot easier because you've rewired your brain to create these new neural pathways. So you have to hang on there because that's where you create the most resilience and you actually become good at something. So by just that graph, for example, that explains so much where people just, stop doing something while they could have just continued and become much better at it. That kind of conversation, for example, as a family is like, oh, so I should, it gives them the tools to have these much deeper conversations about how they can apply this in their daily life, or how they can apply neuroplasticity in their daily life, or how they can use, recover from feeling. So it's only the start because it's only 5-10 minutes. Therefore, it's not a lot of structure. It's just more of a things you can allude to within a much bigger conversation. So it has never been a problem. On the contrary, it's really the gateway to much more.
Yeah, I like the way you've described that. I think from a parent and from an educator, it's about then you can recognize certain behaviors, certain traits, the ways that students look sometimes or the way they interact. And then instead of going, I wonder what I could do, I wonder how I go about, it's then having the tools, like you say, and going, actually, if I ask this question, or if I phrase it in this way, or if I give them this type of activity, then I know that I can have this impact. So it's either that, it's weird when you say it's a structure, but it's not. It's actually, like we've mentioned earlier, it's the upskilling or up-tooling or allowing you to be better at what you want to be doing and recognizing these things. It's often associated more with the males, isn't it? The inability to read emotions is often more associated with males than it is with females.
So the thing is, actually, males are actually more proven to be more sensitive when they're children than girls. But we get this out of them. We just so this generalization is applicable because all the research shows that we treat boys and girls differently, and we will ask questions of boys and girls completely differently, and that really impacts and influences the way they think about things. So with girls, we will tend to ask about how you're feeling about this, and about things that are related to beauty and what do you like this or not and that. And with boys, will be a lot more on that, talking about the achievements, the goals, the sports, and so we're influencing kids. While there is naturally, obviously, a difference. There's no doubt about this. But at the same time, we're not. So what we're doing is putting everyone playing on the same level, at the same playing field. And even so, the special education needs children, the neurodivergent children, all of these, it's really, it's very reassuring for them to actually be taught the same stuff, to not be the one singled out all the times, to realize that everyone needs to learn this. And they just need to be a bit more consistent because of their neurodivergence or because of their challenges. It's more the consistency for them that's needed. But the rest is we all have the same needs as humans. So it puts everyone in the same playing field, and that they feel all part of this, community, and more. So there's a lot more inclusion that comes out of it than if you just go, oh, this is a program for these children because they've got challenges. Like, no, ideally we shouldn't be doing this in schools.
Yeah. But as you were talking there, it got me thinking about, obviously I have daughters, the same as yourself. And then when I'm in school, I'm just thinking about obviously the interactions I have between boys and girls, but even specifically, I'm going to use the word reprimand, and how we go about reprimanding boys versus how we go reprimanding girls. And it came from, like we were saying, about how we treat them. And I'm thinking about the way that, if a boy did something stupid in my class, how I would speak to him, versus if a girl did something stupid in my class, how I would speak to them. And you're right, there's not a level playing field there. It's not an equal thing in terms of how I feel I can speak to boys is very different than how I feel I can speak to girls. And the tone and, the raising of a voice, because I get a very different response from both of them. And that's a big challenge, isn't it?
Yeah. It is. May I catch you on even the word, something stupid, because the biggest transformation for me in my parenting and my whole education, and that's actually, I'm creating a whole, like a lot more content around this, is that we're all doing the best we can. Even when it's something that seems stupid, actually, happens. Is the reality is in that moment, basically, that stems from so many things from the past of that, person or whatever. And actually it's always, when you come from this place of, let's take, assume the best. So basically that person, that child was doing the best they can. And it was probably very stupid in the grand scheme of things, but they were, with their past in that situation, etc. They were just coming at it from trying to address their needs. And they just don't have the tools yet to address this need. And therefore the explanation and the delivery becomes very different, because we have this compassion for them of, what, I can see you're doing the best you can, but I hope you realize that you can do so much better. And as an educator or as a parent, basically, I'm here to help you become that best version of yourself, to fulfill your potential. And here's the things that I would suggest you could do. Or actually, rather, we would always send the question back to them. What can you do? Think differently next time. Yeah. So you can actually address boys and girls a lot more similarly as well when you come from this perspective, because it's, again, you're doing the best you can. What can you do differently next time to be a better version of yourself? Yeah. And and then we we give them the tools, because when they're not fully, basically because they're learning.
Oh, massive. It's that BVOS, isn't it? You just have that. Imagine if every teacher had that somewhere, BVOS written around. It's like best version of self, because we have to catch ourselves. We have to remind ourselves, because it's easy to forget that. It's easy to be emotional and caught up when little Jimmy over there is doing something stupid with a scalpel in my science lesson, or, one of the girls is using her device as a mirror because she wants to put lip gloss on. Those are things that happen in classrooms in the modern day. Trust me, I've seen it happen.
Yeah, I know, of course it does. It's really, and it's frustrating, and it's just like, but it's the thing is, it happens a lot less when they feel they're part of a community, and they've got this, realization that they're not making, it's not just about them, and it is about everyone's, well-being. And it really helps because they become part of bigger thing. They realize they're part of a bigger thing. That's why one of the big things that also we haven't yet developed a lot in our program, but we are in the midst of doing this, is that connection to awe. Because awe is, again, people spell it, I pronounce it differently, but awe, it's that biggest feeling. It's humanity is really very well encompassed in this feeling, because it's both the wonder of, something new and the curiosity around it, and also that feeling of being small within a much bigger thing. Mm. And if you think about younger kids, they're in awe of everything. They're curious about everything. They're like, wow, everything is new and everything is amazing. But we tend to lose this as we grow up. And I realized that if we could keep kids more connected at all to that curiosity, to realizing that just every step we take in this as a human is actually a miracle, is like it requires that perfect kind of balance of chemicals in the environment for us to be able to even breathe, to being more connected to the incredible nature and all that we often lose as well, and bringing more. So the program is about creating the sense of community, but also ultimately to keep children really curious about everything about them, around them, and to realize that there's so much more that they don't know. And so basically this love of learning, of always learning something new, about themselves, others, and about obviously the environment is what I brought this because I think in this best version of ourselves, this sense of awe is really helps, because we become more curious about everyone and more accepting of ourselves and others.
Yeah. No, definitely. Like awe and wonder, as we say with that. It's for me as a scientist, it's one of the easiest things to try and generate. But it kind of nicely segues in, because we're talking about connections and we're talking about awe and kind of impact, as it were. I'm curious, like, obviously for people who follow you and people that know your journey, like, you are connected and in contact with global experts, with thought leaders, with these amazing organizations. What has been the most impactful collaboration and connection for you? And what did it help teach you?
Wow, big question. So recently I've been, I went twice to Necker Island and met Richard Branson, and I've been very inspired by him as an entrepreneur. And actually in that, and everything he's set up, and with Virgin Unite, which is the philanthropic, side of their business, well, not a business per se, but, and what Richard said is like kind of, what drove him all along was not accept the unacceptable. Stop accepting the unacceptable. And I realized, wow, this is what drove me as well. That's why I was so inspired by Sir Richard, is because it's been in all the industries I went into was not accept the unacceptable. And I realized that in the education, parenting initially, and then the education industry is like not accepting this unacceptable. The fact that actually there's so much more we can teach parents. There's so much more that as in the curriculum we can bring into the curriculum, that actually it's unacceptable that children don't learn how to be a human, basically, as a basis at school and in families. And so one of the collaborations that I'm looking at is to bring with the Branson family, is to bring all of these things to a wider public, and to really make this available to a lot more people, including potentially a new curriculum, because there is so I've just recently invested in a school in Barcelona that's called Learn Life, out of Barcelona, and I think they're the first ones who nailed the ideal curriculum, and the reason they did it is actually because they went all around the world, analyzed all the different curriculums, looked at all the research and ended up with a few methodologies, ended up with like bringing all this together into creating something that's really unique and addresses children's needs. And it's much more child-centric, much more passion-driven. And I've interviewed these kids at Learn Life in Barcelona. And I had tears in my eyes because I had such passion for learning, knowing why they were doing this. And I had tears in my eyes because for them, but also because my kids are not accessing this. So I want to make sure that they can access this. And what's great in what they're done is they can actually train teachers to becoming learning guides. So because they don't call teachers, but learning guides, because it's about creating the environment for the kids to actually learn better and have that passion for learning rather than just being a top-down approach to learning. And it's been really incredibly impactful for me. And so I'm looking at ways of, bringing this to every school possible. So that's
it sounds phenomenal. And that, I suppose the easy way to summarize that is that's come about through networking. And obviously over the years, people talk a lot about LinkedIn and this ability to network. From that point of view, what role do you think networking can play on the impact of social and emotional learning and well-being initiatives globally?
Oh yeah, I mean, networking is ultimately where we realize we're social beasts as humans, and actually this is so important. And so, in a way, actually, I mean, I don't want to go back to our program, but it's very much it's creating more networking opportunities, more conversation opportunities at a deep level. So networking is essential, but what I'm finding is not the butterfly networking is important, but actually the finding the themes. So the best networkings are when there's some kind of theme where you actually dive deeper into something and actually you meet people who are really think alike. Because what I found in a lot of conferences, I must admit that I've been to in the last couple of years, because I've been to so many across the world. I'm talking education conferences particularly, is that we go there and everyone agrees there's a problem in the current curriculum and we have to really do things differently. But the reality is we go back to our settings and we just do more of the same, because it's a Titanic. It's you like moving this huge ship is almost, it's beyond one person's capability and beyond the school's capability. And so we need that networking to really start enacting change. And so for me, the conferences have to become beyond the conference. It's not just a conversation realizing, oh, yeah, AI is coming. This is what it's going to do. And this is why the curriculum is broken. And then why particularly secondary children are the loss of why they're even learning this. Well, we need more of getting together and networking as a deeper level to really find styling, to find the solutions and to, bring this beyond governments who are unfortunately often just there for a few years and they know they're going. So what their thinking process as a new, Minister of Education is like, oh, what can I do not even in 4 years, because I might be changed in 1 year, which often happens. I mean, we had 10 Ministers of Education in 10 years in the UK. Well, actually it's now 11. And it was, what can I do? And that can have impact. But what I love is now we're proving that the best thing you can do is invest in SEL and well-being, because that has the biggest return on investment. So that's what we're focused on proving now. And so if we can create these education groups and this kind of networking groups that are really about taking action, hopefully we'll go beyond the conferences and just saying that we need to change and actually really enact change.
Amazing. Within that, obviously some things that came about, one is alignment and one is authenticity. Obviously we know, as you've already mentioned, SEL Wellbeing has a huge impact, and with any, let's say, niche education, where there's always going to be people that want to benefit or at least take advantage of the fact that that's a growing thing and they can take from it. From your side, how would you recommend, how do you go about ensuring that there's an alignment with all your stakeholders, the parents, the teachers, the students, whilst also maintaining an authenticity? Because obviously anyone who's got this far on the podcast and listened to you speak will have been blown away just by your passion and your depth of knowledge about what you're talking about. How do you maintain the authenticity amongst, I'm going to say, the snake oil salesman?
Well, thank you for these words, and I appreciate it. Well, that's why we're now setting up the Happy Confident Foundation, so that we want to make sure that this is accessible to everyone. So the schools who don't have the means, particularly in obviously more difficult continents, we want to make this available to everyone for free. So that's how we we do it. Is that for the people who can afford it, obviously, I mean, we're talking, it's £10 per pupil per year, so, and actually in some cases it's the parents who pay it, and because what is £10? And they have access to a whole host, parents portal, as well as the school having all these incredible resources. So we make it, one, very affordable, and two, actually free for the ones who can't afford it. So that's the answer to making sure that it's completely aligned, and that we're only taking a minimum from the people who it doesn't even, it's a small drop in the ocean, but the impact is so much bigger than this small investment. So that's how we make sure, and we're constantly upgrading so we're really about best practices. So we bring these best schools, that we call them the lighthouse schools, and then they actually bring what they're doing beyond our program to the rest of the schools. So that's when we're talking about networking and growing this, enacting change by bringing best practices, I think is the best way to improve education.
Mm. And thinking about, obviously, you've got that initiative, which is amazing, by the way. How are you seeing, or what do you think the trends and challenges are going to be over these next sort of 5 years when it comes to social and emotional well-being, especially with, let's say, we've already got this amount of technology, but even with the development in technology, where do you see all this going in the next 5 years?
So I think, I'm not sure there's challenges, in social emotional learning. The challenge is how much these technologies, basically, for example, AI enables to personalize a lot of that, it's very positive in some way. Because, we've got, with our huge database of information, and so actually, if you ask AI, what is the top 5 things that people should improve in education? One of the top 5 is SEL. So that's the positive. The challenge is, you can see in the US, for example, it hasn't had impact. I mean, although Castle shows, their research shows that $1 invested in SEL is $11 returned.
Wow! Because
you save so much on when children really start having challenges. Well, you're preventing a lot of challenges from happening. And they've also seen 30% improve in grades and outcomes, basically. So there's no doubt it works. However, despite these really nice numbers, and these are from meta-analysis, so they're analyzing hundreds of other research. So it's not just one research that showed this. But one of the challenges is that it becomes a tick box exercise. Oh yeah, we've done our SEL. And so when it's not about really, we're here to create that environment. We believe that children need to feel safe, and that emotional safety that we're creating by the teaching SEL is what we're bringing to our school. If you don't have that commitment, then it becomes, it's just not as useful. It's a tick box, and you don't want tick box exercises anymore, because that's not what it's about. It's about creating this humanity. So I think that's really the only challenge I see. I think because thankfully most people, since COVID, are starting to see that it's a necessity and a must-have, and not a nice-to-have anymore. It's just, how do we do it? And that's why I'm delighted to be here on the podcast, because giving ideas to, whether it's our program or not, but realizing that 5-10 minutes a day can be enough, and that you can create innovative things in any setting, is liberating, because and that it's not overwhelming for the teachers is the other thing that needs to be addressed, because the teachers just have too much on the plate. So, and I believe that AI is going to help on that. We're seeing the more innovative teachers really use AI to decrease their workload. You're an expert in this, so I don't need to talk to your audience about this. But it's really, I think, it's going to help reduce the admin part and really give more time for that humanity. Because ultimately, what are we, in the age of AI, what can we do in schools if it's not learn how to better serve as a community, better be as a community, and better learn how to interact as humans, because that's what's really the most important part, and developing these soft skills that AI cannot teach us. Although I have these very soft, interactions with AI where I'm just like, wow, I've never been given as much empathy by anyone in my conversation than AI. So it's kind of counterintuitive.
It's scary crazy. And again, the conversations I had recently was the benefit of it, or what are we trying to do? It's like, we're trying to be better humans, not better test takers. And that was a great quote, really stands out for me. And I get this all the time, even at school, where it comes to anything technology based, anything AI based, people look at you and goes, oh yeah. And it's like, well, actually I'm trying, and this is, I'll tell you how I've used it recently, is I would look at AI, and it's helping me design my curriculums, because I get to have these fantastic conversations with people. And I go, right, okay, well, I need to have learning outcomes and I need to have activities, but where it's going to help me is that, right, I need to have 6 C's. Most schools operate some of 6 C's, like the IB Learner Profile. So communication, collaboration, but we have 2 different ones. We're using Michael Fullan's. We want citizenship and character. Okay, I'm going to do some research with an AI. I'm going to take the information and I can put it in. But the other column it's really helped me with is SEL, because we know, and as educators, we're time poor, and yet the expectation is, right, you need to be an expert in pedagogy, you need to be an expert in emotional intelligence, you need to be an expert in, all these different things. And it's like, I'm not. And I'm not. But where AI can help me is I can do my research and find out information about SEL, and I can put it into a bot, or I can put it into a project, and it can help me design a curriculum and give me, and I like this is the best thing, options. It can give me options for activities of how I can incorporate SEL, social or emotional components into it. And as someone told me the other day, and what we don't realize as educators is we do so much social already. Like just collaboration, speaking to the students, getting the students to speak to each other. And even one of the teachers I spoke to in Finland was like, well, for the first couple of weeks, we don't even use the devices. Students need to learn to self-regulate, and they kind of get to the point where they earn it back. And so from an AI side, like, I'm not going to go, hey, tell me all your feelings. We've seen the danger of that. But it can help me analyze data. It can help offer me suggestions or options of things to do. And it can help me as someone who's a non-expert in certain things like SEL to try and embed activities into my task, into my curriculum, that help me then develop students' emotional well-being, their morals and ethics, their social interactions. That for me has been is a huge impact in the types of lesson that I've been delivering.
Amazing. Yeah, I so agree. Exactly. It can give so many options. I mean, I'm surprised by some conversation I'm having, because the options and the ideas it gives us are like bang on. Of course you need the filter and you need the expertise, because sometimes it's not, but in the majority of cases, it's really impressive and surprising. And so, and that's where, I mean, particularly for secondary, it's particularly useful. And so we stop at 13, because there's the engagement of the videos, the activities, etc., have to be super engaging for that age group. But in secondary, there are where you don't need as much visuals, and you can actually, as you said, have options and suggest options to the kids, and actually, ask them to the reflections on something, and particularly, as you said, it could be in pairs or in smaller group sizes as well. There's incredible things that can happen of them, and connections that can happen from it.
Oh, most definitely. So I'm loving that at the moment, in terms of being able to really modify curriculums and embed those things and develop citizenship with kids. Like we were talking about isotopes today. So year 9 chemistry, so the 13, 14-year-olds, and they had a citizenship task, and we were doing about isotopes. So for chemistry ones out there, but we have uranium-235. So for those people, again, uranium-235 can be used for nuclear power stations. So the question as a citizen was, what have been the positive and the negative impacts?
Wow.
Again,
Wow.
And that's me as an expert, but I'm using AI.
Oppenheimer.
Yeah. Prime example.
Watch Oppenheimer.
You know, but most of the kids have heard of him and they've seen it, and you can go into that. Oh wow.
Yeah.
So now I'm bringing these connections, real world connections. And then we go even further. The citizenship question would be, well, who should be in charge of regulating this? Down the road in Abu Dhabi, we know the nuclear power plants have, you know, there's plans and they've started to open and build these things. You know, and then we get to the conversations of, imagine if you had a nuclear reactor in your home in 50 years. It's like, well, think about it's crazy. But then I said to the kids, it's like, well, look at the computer you've got. They've all got iPads. 50 years ago, the concept of having something like that, it's like, well, that was just for governments. Only governments had that power, you know, type of thing. And whereas now, and so those types of things that for me, normally, I'd be like, I want to develop these skills, but I don't quite have the whereabouts or the time or the knowledge. But now within 5-10 minutes of being able to do this, I can create these lessons, I can create these activities that allow those conversations, allow those thought processes. And all of a sudden chemistry to these kids is more relatable. It's like, oh, wow, I didn't realize. And I just picked out one. Some of them went and looked at carbon, simple carbon-14. Some of them went and looked at iodine, you know, in terms of medical uses. So society, and it's just, I think, the more teachers we can get in line with it and just see those types of benefits and the types of activities we can do, you know, then the holistic development of kids, the emotional well-being, the social components and interactions, it's not like tech, screen. It's like, no. How can I make you a better human? I think that for me is the overarching field of it.
Totally.
But I'm
totally, and in the classroom and beyond it, which is exactly that. And, you know, because that's where, I mean, since, we seem to have forgotten that you know, what we teach, what we learn in the classroom is to learn beyond it, to actually be, and so all these I mean, you know, we're still on the same page.
Amazing. So what would you, I'm curious to say with this one then, but like, obviously I'm talking there about want to develop these humans, but there's generational teachers out there, teachers older than me, who are going to be like, you know what, all this emotional mumbo jumbo, you're just making kids soft. You're making kids soft, you know, it'd be action. How do we go about balancing that? Because to some extent, you know, we've got to be very mindful of the balance that we have in terms of emotional intelligence with maybe other life skills, emotional intelligence with like the ability to act upon it, not just talk about it. Like, what do you say to those generational teachers who are, you know, concerned about making students too soft?
Yeah, I mean, it is a big, I was interviewed on Sky News actually, and they were saying, what the older generation say, you know, that the children are not resilient anymore. We used to cope with so much more. And there is some part of truth in there, but we were also in a very different setting, as I said, in terms of thoughts, options, etc. That also children pick up a lot more on general anxiety, and there's more anxiety in general. Therefore, it's kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy. So first of all, it is important to have this new information to realize, stop, you know, we can't compare the world of before to the current world, you know. So in this current world, actually, to teach resilience, and it's so important. And there was an article in the BBC, which was excellent actually on that, and how important it is to teach resilience, and that maybe children are becoming a lot less resilient. Well, emotional resilience is a big component of resilience. And emotional resilience is realizing that suppressing feelings is not, as we used to do in the past, which was a lot, like, enabled us to go through much more. But a lot of people now are having challenges as they grow older and are going through the shrink at 70, 80 because they're not happy with their lives. So there's something about, we used to be okay, actually is not true anymore. So realizing that the ones who thought they were okay end up with their own set of challenges. Therefore, suppression is not the option. Therefore, what do? Well, the best thing we can do is not just acknowledge the feelings, because that's the scary bit, is like, we have all these feelings. But actually, what do we do with these feelings? So actually, the best thing we can do is teach children to become feelings shifters and realize, I've got all these tools and all these, strategies to help me when I have a difficult feeling. So instead of suppressing, because I'm afraid of not being able to deal with that, and that's how you end up with so many children in depression, etc., because they re-trigger the feeling. Now we've learned, and that's actually always based on science, that's the best way to address these things, is the refractory period, the amount of time a feeling is really in our body and takes over our body, etc., 90 seconds. That's what science shows. And the problem is when we go into depression, things like that, is because we re-trigger the feeling regularly. And so therefore we end up with this feeling, the cortisol in our body, the anxiety hormone, a lot longer. But if we teach the children just at the 90 seconds, they can address the feeling, feel it, because not suppress it, like get the information you need from it, and then recover from it. And it only lasts for 90 seconds. I think that's what emotional resilience is. And therefore, don't be afraid of it. I would say to basically the more traditional people, don't be afraid of this. Just realize now there's a science to it. And actually we can teach these kids, and they become so much more resilient, emotionally resilient. And then they can apply a lot more. When they have more sense of agency, they become resilient on all fronts. They recover. They learn that mistakes are okay. They learn that their intelligence is not fixed, and they can learn. So you don't end up with having children who tell you, oh, no, I'm not good at the math, I'm not good at art, I'm not good at that. But actually that they realize that they can be good at anything. They really strive to become the best version and to really learn more curious. So it's through science, actually, and realizing that now we have enough science to show that in neuroscience, for example, with the name entertainment that I mentioned, that it's important to do these things. And there are tools, and therefore, don't be afraid of it. It's only 5-10 minutes a day. So it's just focus on solutions, and the solutions are there. I think is the most reassuring part.
Definitely. We're starting to wrap this up, and one of the things we move towards in this, we've got this is a quick fire round. So I've got 4 quick fire questions for you, more about yourself and interesting stuff from that. So I'm going to start us off. A parenting myth you wish would disappear.
Oof. Parenting myths, just to make sure I understand the parenting myth, it's basically like that. That the one I mentioned about the thoughts that it's better to tell our kids, oh, you don't have to think that way, just think positively. It's a parenting myth that you have to. The myth basically is the mistake of thinking that by telling them don't think that way, they're going to stop thinking like this, and instead basically realize. We all had these when we were younger. Why do we tell our kids, oh, you don't think like I used to think, or that I'm still thinking? Instead, go, you know what? This still happens to me. And it's just such a bummer. Yeah. Instead, I tell myself, you know what? No, I'm not stupid when I think like that. When I actually just realized that I could practice things differently. Yeah. So that's
I can completely relate to that one. If you could collaborate with any historical figure on a well-being initiative, who would it be and why?
Historical. Okay, so it has to I did not prepare for these. Sorry. Historical figures, I would could we skip this one and come back to it? It'll come to me. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. No worries.
Silly, I should prepare for the
We'll come back. We can edit that part out. I've got 2 more. Yeah. We'll see if we can. So this one is a book or resource every parent or educator should read.
My God, I love these questions. Can we record this in 2 minutes?
We can come
so 1 second.
Yeah.
So a book or resource that every parent should read. Actually, my favorite parenting book was, apart from mine, obviously, is Parenting from the Inside Out, Dan Siegel.
Okay.
Parenting from the Inside Out, because I think it brings so much great science, neuroscience into it. And not just fluffy stuff, so it's kind of a really good, I think every parent should read Parenting, and educators as well.
Great stuff.
Dan Siegel, great neuroscientist.
Add that in. And then lastly, what's a failure or challenge that taught you an invaluable lesson?
The failure that actually my kids, I thought I was a great dad, and actually that they would tell me once I opened up and I said, I want to change. I realized I could do things better. Like they would tell me, actually when I'd fail, they would make me accountable for that, and it would make me realize, no, I can be better. I can get better. Until now, so I stopped talking about parenting for a few years because I was wondering if I was authentic enough, and actually my parenting had succeeded, and actually now I have the most beautiful relationship with my kids. And so they made me kind of accountable to these mistakes. So actually it's not one mistake, I would say, but it's the series of actually failing and realizing that we need to fail a lot to learn. Yeah. But when your environment knows that, and the kids realize, as humans, we need to fail a lot to learn as well, it gives them more compassion to them for themselves as well. And then we learn together. So it's that repetitive failure of how to be a best version of myself.
There is, having experienced this myself, there is nothing more humbling and I think gut-wrenching from my side. This is how I felt when my youngest daughter, and this was today, by the way, and she said it before, but today, like, we laugh and joke, and I'm like, I'm amazing, blah, blah, blah. And she just walked up to me and said, "No, you're an okay parent." I was like, "What?" She said, "You're okay." Like, "You're okay." And
it's enough.
And I'm just, when you just like, when she's like, just, but, and what you've said then, and you could pass it off and go, it's a laugh and a joke. You could be like, "Oh, you're only 9. But actually, like, everything you've said today is like, well, maybe there's some truth. Maybe there's some validation in what she's saying. And nobody wants to think they're a terrible parent. No one wants to think they're just okay. But actually, the hard step in this is going, right, actually, maybe I need to address this. And that in itself is scary and it's challenging. But from everything you've said today and from your own experience, it is a very much worthwhile activity to do. So
yeah, and being okay, you know what, is huge because okay is good enough. And we tend to, we all have that syndrome of not being good enough without realizing. It's either subconscious or we've already put it in, realized it, and we're like, so being an okay parent is good enough, actually. And we're doing, and we're failing from time to time. But then from that okay parent, we can have the most amazing relationship with our kids. And that's the most important bit.
There's still hope for me.
For everyone, for all of us. It's amazing.
All right. So drawing this one to a close, from the conversation, this amazing conversation, by the way, that we have had today, that I'm inspired by. There's so much from it I've taken away, and I've had the pleasure of being able to listen to you speak and speak to you personally at numerous different conferences. I've been very fortunate about that. But for the listeners and for the viewers out there, if they could take away one message from this conversation today, what would you like it to be?
I thank you for the nice words again. I think it's really that 5-10 minutes a day of connection and learning, ideally together, something is what creates the most incredible relationship, the most incredible conversations. And so just have that be mindful that find these 5-10 minutes a day. It could be actually sharing gratitude in the evening or the different ways you felt today, and then opening up about something. Having these conversations and feeding that connection at a deep level and vulnerability is what creates the most beautiful human bonds. And so be conscious about these 5-10 minutes a day and just do them, whether you're as a teacher or as a parent. It's so invaluable. You get that. That's what then very quickly transforms the whole environment, and that's where the real joy comes from.
Wonderful. A great message, a great takeaway, and something definitely that will be implementing with my 2 lovely ones out there. For those people who have really enjoyed this and want to know more and to find more about your work, where is going to be the best place for them to find you, to find the Happy Confident Company?
Thanks. Well, the website is happyconfident.com. Easy. And we've got a school section and we've got a family section. So it's easy to navigate for schools. Go to the school section because there's so much information out there. And or Google me and find me.
There'll be a photo of you on Necker Island, probably. Nadim, it has been an absolute pleasure. I really, really appreciate you coming on and just sharing that wisdom and passion with us today. And just wanted to take the time to say thank you and to wish you all the best for 2025.
Thank you so much, Alex. I really appreciate your work. I find your energy so I mean, not only your listening skills, but you've got incredible energy that really makes a difference. And I'm looking forward to listening to a lot more of your podcasts.
Really appreciate that. Thank you. You take care and enjoy that lovely English winter weather.
Thank you. It's actually sunny out there once.